Hello and welcome to another episode of Sermon Braindump. My name is Scott Dalen, an ELCA pastor in Southwest Iowa, and I present these videos every week for a couple different reasons. The first of which is just to move my brain out of the mode of background work over the course of the week and move into the process of actually writing and preparing the sermon that I will preach to my congregation for the weekend. That's the first reason. And the second is just to allow you, the viewer who has come across this video for whatever reason brought you here today, to gain some different insight into the assigned text for the week. That is why I do these. As I record these, if you are a regular viewer, you'll notice I'm back in my regular surroundings. A week ago, I was actually recording in a hotel room in St. Paul, Minnesota, as I was there for a conference. Back in the normal mode here today. Also, as I record this today, happy Groundhog's Day, everyone, February 2nd, as I'm recording this. Apparently, the news is Puxatawny Phil saw his shadow, and that means 6 more weeks of winter. But whatever, fortunately, what I do know about meteorology is that it's 90% guessing anyway. So winter will last as long as winter lasts, regardless of what a fuzzy groundhog has to say. But all that being said, how about we go ahead and jump in. This particular Sunday, which is February 4th, 2018, the 5th Sunday after Pentecost, our assigned text comes out of Mark chapter 1, verses 29 through 39. We are still here in Mark chapter 1. We've been we've been hanging out in Mark 1 quite a bit here through the season of Epiphany, though Epiphany is winding down as we are looking towards the calendar. We have this Sunday, and then next Sunday, a week from now, is Transfiguration Sunday, which is still technically the final Sunday of Epiphany, but it kind of also is sort of its own standalone Sunday thing, just that happens just before we move into Lent. Ash Wednesday is coming up on the 14th, so less than 2 weeks away, we will be into the season of Lent. So where are we at here in Mark? As per usual with Mark's gospel, it being the shortest, the most concise of all 4 gospels, the action moves pretty quickly. There's not a lot of filler, oftentimes details that are present in the same stories in Matthew and in Luke are not necessarily present here in Mark, and things just move kind of quickly along. If you happen to catch last week's video, we heard about Jesus being in Capernaum. This is immediately after he has called the first disciples of Peter, Andrew, James, and John as he walked along the seashore, and Capernaum is the town where they all live. It seems to be their hometown. And so we'll hear that Peter actually has a house here in Capernaum. That's part of the action today. But so he has called them, and they go into Capernaum, and immediately they go into the synagogue, and where Jesus encounters a man who, in the midst of his teaching, who has an unclean spirit. That's kind of what we talked about last week. And Jesus heals the man of the unclean spirit, whatever that unclean spirit is, and as a way to display his authority and how the teaching that he gives, his message, his proclamation has authority. So that has wrapped up, and they've gone back out of the synagogue, and that's where we pick up here today with chapter 1, 29 through 39. We kind of have several different little tiny micro chapters or scenes or whatever you want to call it that occur over the course of this 10 verses, and but it does pick up immediately after that. And I bring that up, that's important to note, because it is the Sabbath. The setting for this, at least where we pick up, is the Sabbath, and that's important to note. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. Mark chapter 1, 29 through 39. As soon as they, or he, but Jesus and the disciples, left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let us go now on into the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also, for that is what I came out to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. So that's it. Again, several different little things that are going on. So Jesus has just been, whoa, we got a little voice crack going on there. Excuse me. Jesus has just been in the synagogue preaching and healing here on the Sabbath. And they leave and they go into Peter's house where his mother-in-law is sick with a fever, and we hear about that. And Jesus continues with the act of healing. And we hear he goes to her at once, grasps her by the hand, and lifts her or raises her up. Some interesting Greek at work here in that he raises her up. She is raised. It's passive in how the Greek occurs, and she is raised. And we hear the exact same thing at the resurrection when Jesus is raised. He is raised from the dead. She is raised up too, and he takes her by the hand. He lifts her up. Many different things are at play here. Now, in the Jewish culture, when someone was sick, oftentimes they would be considered unclean. Admittedly, I don't know if that is the case here with the fever or not, but if to even go into the room with someone who is unclean is to risk your becoming unclean yourself. To touch a sick person is to risk being made unclean. And again, there's all kinds of rules, and I don't know if they apply here or not. I'm just throwing this out for some background or for some side notes. Clearly, at that time, medicine was not real spectacular. So if someone was sick with a fever, oftentimes it could be fatal. And to go be near them is to risk getting sick yourself, and then you in turn, it could be fatal for you. So there's a lot that Jesus is risking here by going to her, touching her, and lifting her up. But Jesus will cross those boundaries. Jesus will risk it. And so then she is healed. We hear the fever leaves her, almost like the fever is an entity itself, like the unclean spirits that we were talking about, or the demons that we also hear about. But it leaves her, and she's restored back into to health. And many scholars will also postulate, that's a word I never use, they will suggest that in this healing of Jesus, that she also becomes a follower. She becomes a disciple. And we hear that, we see that, and I need to point this out because there's a point of contention here, that she's healed and immediately begins to serve them. That's the way it's lifted here, that's written here. Now, got to go back to the Greek again. The Greek for to serve is diakonia. And this also means to do ministry. She ministered to them. She attended to them. This is the same exact word that's used when Jesus is in the wilderness with the temptation, and the angels waited on him or served him or ministered to him. All the same word. It's also the same word when Jesus says, I came not to be served, but to be a servant. I came not to receive diakonia, but to diakonia others. It's all the same thing, and some scholars or some will speculate or will suggest that what she is doing here is taking her place as a disciple. She is joining in the ministry, and this is what the ministry looks like. That she is ministering to them, just as they minister to one another and minister to others. Like Jesus says at the end too, if you want to be great, the one who will be great among you must become a servant to all, must become a slave to all, must diakonia to all. All the same word that happens in different points in the gospel. Now, where there's tension here is in the idea that she's restored and immediately she has to serve the man, different people have different takes on that, and some will use this as a basis for saying that the place of women is not in a place of leadership, but it's in a place of servitude within the church, and I don't buy it. Personally, I don't buy it at all. And there's many different scriptures that we can point to say that the most likely being, or the most important being, that the first witnesses, the first evangelicals, the first proclaimers of the truth that Christ has risen from the dead were women. So hey, the first preachers were women to proclaim the risen Christ, and I will bang that gong as much as I can. So is this saying that the women's place is in the kitchen? Heck no. I don't buy it. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent there. Let's move on. So that happens in the morning. And again, remember, it's still Sabbath day. No work is allowed, but Jesus crosses that boundary too and heals on the Sabbath day. Now we hear in verse 32 that evening, and this is an important little note, because in the Jewish reckoning, the day the day begins at sundown. So for the Sabbath to be going on, when it's sundown on Saturday night, because Saturday is their Sabbath, so Saturday night that's going into Sunday, that's the beginning of the next day. So when it's sundown on Saturday night, that means that the Sabbath is now over. But it began on Friday night. At sundown Friday night is when the Sabbath begins, and at sundown on Saturday, that's when the Sabbath ends. So it's now evening, which means it's sundown, which means Sabbath is over. And this is when we hear all the people from Capernaum are bringing the sick and bringing those who have demons, and Jesus heals them all. And that's an important point to make. And I bring this up because they're still following the rules. These people are still following the rules. They desire healing for their friends and family, those who are sick, those who are possessed. They desire healing, but they're still following the rules. They won't carry the sick person because that's work. You can't do that. They won't allow them to be healed because that's work, and you can't do that on the Sabbath. These are all things that break the law, that break the rules. And yet we see that Jesus heals them all. Jesus has compassion on all these people. We hear the entire city crowds around the door. And not that the Capernaum is a really big town, so it's not like the entire city of Omaha, which is where I'm close to, or like the Twin Cities or all of New York or whatever, gathered around the door of this one house. But everyone from town came. So clearly they're appreciating what Jesus has to do. They've heard his message in the synagogue. So they're open to what's going on. It seems that Jesus' ministry here in Capernaum is a success. That's what we see from this. And yet, we then see that overnight, when it's still dark, Jesus goes off by himself. He disappears into the deserted place somewhere outside of town. The disciples are hunting for him, and that hunting is pretty spot on. They're hunting. They're not just looking, they're hunting. And think about the connotation of what that means. When we're hunting for something, we desire something from it. We are going to take from it. Like if you're a hunter, you're literally going out to kill something in order to get something from it, whether it's food or a trophy or whatever. That's the way that it's described. So they find him, and Peter says basically, hey, everyone is searching for you. Everyone else is hunting for you. Like everyone needs you. Come on back. Things are going well here. Let's stay here. We're popular here. Things are going really good right here from the get-go. Let's stay here. And Jesus says, no, let's go on somewhere else that I may proclaim or that I may preach elsewhere, because that is what I came out to do. So I think that last statement of Jesus is important. He didn't come just for one place. He came for all people, but throughout Galilee, down to Jerusalem, he makes his way around, and his message is intended for all the world. That it will not be limited to this one place, that it will not stay just in this one town where he's popular, where things are going well. And I think about all of this, and what is Jesus come to do? He says, let us go to the other places so I may proclaim the message there also. Well, what's the message? It's that the kingdom of heaven has come near. Rejoice, repent, be glad, the kingdom of heaven has come near. Jesus has come to proclaim this message. Will he perform miracles? Will he have compassion on the people? Will he heal them? Yes, and we see that. But that's not necessarily what he came to do. Those are displays of his power. Those are displays of his authority. That's really what they seem to serve here, especially in the first chapter of Mark. But his reason for being here is to proclaim this message. The message that the kingdom of heaven has come near, and God is doing something utterly new. Now, I need to back up to that point I made earlier about the Sabbath being over, and that's when the people come. They're still following the rules. And of course, Jesus' ministry is brand new. And yet, despite what they see, despite what they experience, despite what they witness in Christ, they still want to keep him for themselves. They want to keep him near so they can benefit from his power. And yet, perhaps Jesus sees this as they're trying to force my hand. They want me to play the Messiah card as they understand it, which, keep in mind, the Messiah is the anointed leader, or the anointed one of God. He typically is the leader, like the kings, like King David, King Solomon. They were anointed. They were messiahs. So are the people still operating under that mentality? And that's what the people of Capernaum want. That's what they want from him, is to put him in a political situation and kick the Romans out. Is this telling of the understanding of the Messiah today? And I think so. But they seem to be stuck in the old how can we put it? I heard it said recently, the old bookkeeping method or the old scoreboard method or the old rule book, however you want to say it, the old reckoning, the old way of doing it. They're still stuck in that. And we see that they waited until Sabbath was over before they would bring people to be healed, before they would bring people to be freed of what hinders their good life. And Jesus is doing something new, and that's what he's come to proclaim. So I think when Jesus says, let's move on, he's saying two different things. One, they don't quite get it. Yeah, our ministry's gone well here, Peter. I agree with you, but they don't quite get it. They're still stuck in the old way of thinking, and we are doing something new. I am doing something new. We are bringing about something new. So let's go proclaim that message. That's what we came to do. That's what's happening here, and that's the direction I'm going with the sermon this week of really trying to flesh that out of how Jesus is doing something utterly different. That's what the action of God in the world through the life, death, and resurrection of Christ is accomplishing. Something different. It's not just finishing this. It's not just updating this. It's utterly new. This is no more, and it's something different. And that's what we are invited into. So if you have thoughts or questions or comments, throw them down in the comment section. We'll continue the conversation that way. Otherwise, have a blessed week, and we will catch you next time.